Hey everyone, this is going to be a quick video reviewing the Cold Steel Dragonfly Katana. Before we get to this, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe. This sword was sent to me by a customer to customize, and he asked that before I customize this, that I review it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So the pros of this sword is the fittings are pretty nice. They have a dragonfly motif. It has shitome on the kashra, if that's your thing. The little gold eyelets on there, which is pretty nice. That matches the manuki, the seppa, and the habaki. The ska isn't too thick, so for those of you with smaller hands, this isn't too bad. Also, the saya fit is decent, and the edge to spine direction is pretty good. Side to side has just a tad bit of wobble, but not much to speak of. And there's just a tad in the twisting direction. Also, the koiguchi fit is pretty good. So out of box, this is pretty good for iaijutsu and kenjutsu. And that's pretty much all the pros. So now let's get to the cons, because there are a lot of cons with this sword. So the first con with this sword is the skamaki, that is the handle wrap. This one came very loose. The customer did polyurethane this one to try to tighten it up. And even with that, it is a little bit loose in some spots. Also, the edges at the fuchi aren't the cleanest. At the kashra, the transitions aren't bad at the edges. On the handle wrap, also, the hishigami are very visible. The hishigami are the little paper wedges that go in the folds. Also, in assembly, they beat the heck out of the makugi, which are the retaining pins. So, out of box, those need to be replaced. Also, this is a very heavy sword for what it is. This is an unokubi zukuri blade. So, on this blade, it thins right at this point right here, a little bit less than halfway down the blade, and then it thickens back up a few inches away from the kisaki, which is the point. So this blade profile is supposed to be lighter, and compared to Cold Steel's other swords, this one is. The weight on this particular sword is 2 pounds 9.7 ounces. To give you an idea, I have an old Kazhanwei Shobuzukuri Raptor that weighs 2 pounds 10.4 ounces, and it's still more balanced than this sword is. And that's partially because this sword has no profile taper to speak of. The point of balance on this sword is 6 inches from the tsuba, which is the handguard. This kind of blade really should be maybe 4 inches from the tsuba. 6 inches is way too much for what this sword is. Also, this sword came with a crack in the habaki, right out of box. And this was the second one that he got. The first one actually had epoxy on the blade. Also, the profile of this blade is not very even. This sword has 2 bohi that go down the blade. One of them goes down the shinogi, and one of them is down the shinogi hi, which is very common for an unokubi zukuri blade. The bohi that goes down the shinogi is about a 1/4 inch longer on one side than it is the other. When you compare the bohi that's on the shinogi hi, one side is very crisp, the other one is less so. So as you can see, there's one side right there, and there's the other. Also on the bohi, on the shinogi hi, it's not ground evenly on both sides either, as you can see. One of these has a more angular end to it right here. This one is a bit more rounded in this area. It kind of dips right in the middle. Also, the profile going down the blade isn't very even either. The edge out of box wasn't great. This edge has been touched up, but out of box edge was not very good. So now I'll take this sword apart and I'll show you the rest of the problems. After getting the Makugi out, the ska wasn't too difficult to take off. So once the handle is taken off, there is a crack right in the opening of the handle. And this core is very thin. So thin that when you put the fuchi on, which is the handle collar, it is very loose. So this core could be bulked up a little bit, and it would be great because, number one, the fuchi would fit better, but of course it would make for a more durable core. Also, the Makugi holes in the handle do not line up with the ones in the tang very well. On the top one, it's not too bad. On the bottom one, you can see there is a lot of exposed tang there. So that wasn't done well at all. Also, when you look at the handle length compared to the length of the tang, you'll notice that it's quite a bit longer. This handle is 3 inches longer than the tang. Now, historically speaking, the length of the tang to the length of the handle was not always the way that they are now. However, in modern swords, usually the handle is no longer than 1.5 inches longer than the tang. Up to 2 inches is generally seen as acceptable. In this case, this is 3 inches. This is quite a bit extra. And that's a problem because the longer the handle, the more your hands are essentially on just plain wood when you're holding the handle. And what I mean by that is when I'm holding the handle, there is tang all the way through where my top hand is holding. On the bottom hand, that's mostly unsupported wood. So that means that this handle core would be more likely to break with harder cutting, such as cutting bamboo. The shaping on the tang definitely isn't the best. However, my next issue is when you're taking this sword apart, this tsuba, which is the handguard, is on here so tight, I need a rubber mallet to drive it off. So I'm going to get this tsuba off right now, and I will be right back. So I've got the tsuba off. And again, to put this back together, I would have to drive this back on with a rubber mallet. So that's not great for the average user. This tsuba gets tight about 1/4 inch away from the seppa, which isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. However, there are some that fit like that and you can kind of just push them into place. This one, you have to drive it on with a rubber mallet. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't to say that a snug fit of the tsuba is a bad thing. It is generally desirable. However, this tsuba is so tight that on the corner right here at the opening for the tang on the edge side, steel actually curled up. You can see it and you can feel it. So this tsuba is entirely too tight. So that's pretty much it. Even if you end up with a cold steel Dragonfly that doesn't have the build quality issues that this sword does, it's an overly heavy sword. The tang is not long enough, and overall, you could get better. However, I am going to be customizing this sword. So I'm going to customize this sword, and then I will show it to you right now. And here it is after customizing. I carved a new ska core. The ska is the handle. I lacquered the Samigawa, which is the raised skin. I lacquered it black. This is a black silk Gyaokawa Kumiyagi Maki. That is a Christian style of wrap, typically done in leather. That's actually what the Gyao part refers to, is leather. But this is silk instead. The green and black on the handle wrap goes with the black and green on the Sagya, which is this cord right here. This also now has just a single pin because that is what the customer requested, and that is smoked bamboo. The habaki, which is this blade collar right here, has been smoothed out and blackened. And it also has custom brass seppa. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.